To Books on Point, the Battle of Bangui tells a story of the time South Africa suffered its worst military defeat since the end of apartheid. In March 2013, after a battle that lasted almost 2 days, 200 crack troops who engaged 7,000 rebels in the Central African Republic were forced to negotiate a ceasefire at the base. 13 South African soldiers died in the battle, with 2 more later succumbing to their wounds. In an investigation spanning more than 7 years, the authors gained exclusive access to the soldiers who fought valiantly against overwhelming odds. For more, we're joined by one of the authors, Warren Thompson. Warren, thank you so much for your time.
Afternoon, Nastasia. Great to be with you.
So talk to me about why, between yourself, Stefan Hofstadter, and James Otway, that you guys felt like a broader look into this particular scenario was needed for this book.
Yeah, so obviously the battle was fought in 2013, March 2013. And in the aftermath, James and Stefan had been sent by the Sunday Times to go and cover the battle. They were the only South African media sent to the country's capital, Bangui. And there they had the opportunity to, first of all, visit the battle scenes just days after this had happened. And it was in every sense a major conflagration with hundreds of men that had been killed. And secondly, they were able also to interview the Seleka rebel leaders. And as far as we know, they were the only leaders, the only media that were, South African media certainly, that were able to do that. So that, together with the access that they had to the SANDF High Command that fought the battle and were in control of the operations, made them very compelling partners. But it would only be in 2017 when the Gupta leaks were released, and we learned of the Gupta's efforts to secure an oil block in the north of the country that triggered my particular interest in the battle, that we would eventually join forces. And so since about 2017, I began researching what had happened, and would meet up with James and Stefan in early 2019. And we were eventually contracted by Penguin to write the book, which has just been published.
So why was it so important for you guys to outline the history of Bangui, especially in chapter 2, which is titled Forged in Blood?
Yeah, so I think, like most South Africans, I couldn't pronounce the name Bangui. It's pronounced Bangui. I'd pronounced it Bangui. And many South Africans don't even really know anything about the Central African Republic. I certainly couldn't even find it on a map of Africa when I began the project. So we thought it was important to explain the cycle of violence and corruption that have plagued the country from its colonial days and even post-independence, to provide a picture of what South Africa entered into when we first of all began a military cooperation agreement in 2007, and later used that very benign agreement as the basis for inserting a serious military force there in late 2012. So we thought, I knew very little about the country. Obviously, James and Stefan have been there twice over the course of 2013 and 2014. But we thought it was important to introduce the reader to just the perpetual trauma that the civilian population in this small country has been subjected to for years and years and years. And even now, when you view the civil war that's effectively underway there, with Bozize now attempting to get his to regain control, people understand that it's the same cycle. It's just different actors this time. Now it's Rwanda and Russia that have inserted troops there, and there's been reports of human rights abuses by the Russian troops, and perhaps nefarious reasons for getting involved there. But we thought it was important to introduce the reader and South Africans to this land where we had suffered this major military defeat.
On that note, then, when did the courtship between South Africa and the Central African Republic start?
So it actually started in 2006. And one of the strange things is, as dubious as President Zuma's deployment was in 2012, it was preceded by an equally questionable military agreement signed by President Mbeki the military agreement was signed in 2007, but the courtship began in 2006. And it just so happened to coincide with Sam Jonah's Uraman mining company attempting to get their hands on or attempting to buy a uranium mine in the Central African Republic. And one of the things we thought was interesting was that President Bozize was faced by this rapprochement from the South Africans. On the one hand, he had President Mbeki inviting him to a summit and offering him military assistance. And on the other hand, there was this very prominent mining mogul in the form of Sam Jonah that was attempting to get a uranium asset in Car. And we asked the question whether the two were linked. And we'll let the reader decide there, the competing interests that were faced by certainly the Car president as this rapprochement began. It was very questionable from our point of view, and then later was abused, in our opinion, by President Zuma to send a fighting contingent in there for, again, very questionable reasons.
All right, before I let you go, is there one question that remains unanswered for you with regards to this particular incident?
So we took out of the investigation, we looked at all the plausible reasons for why we would send men to die in this country. And certainly as far as we're concerned, there was no strategic interest in doing so. South Africa was in contravention of an agreement that had been reached in Libreville to find peace and hand over transfer of power. And we know that there were people with business interests linked with men that have links to the ruling party, the ANC, that were doing business in Car at the time. But what we need to understand, the one remaining question we have, is what convinced President Zuma to send the troops there if there was no sound reason and no legal basis to do so.
All right, Warren, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. That is Warren Thompson, who is one of the co-authors of a new book titled The Battle of Bangui, which he has written with Stefan Hofstadter and James Otway.